Chair Bill, just a minute. We'll get Kayla, who's going to start the meeting. This, of course, meeting will actually be live streamed as well, everybody. So this is a live streamed meeting as it's a really important discussion. So let's put it over.
You're officially live.
Oh, there you go. Okay, Bill, go ahead.
Okay. So again, we're calling our meeting to order today at 1:07 p.m. Thank you very much for everybody who was able to tune in. So it looks like we have quorum because I see Ed, Barb, Connie, myself, and Marianne. So we have a quorum here for the hall. And actually, Doug, I guess you qualify as a member as well to make quorum, correct? So.
Thank you.
Okay, so bear with me here, guys. Okay, so we will ask for an approval of the agenda. It's a short one. It's we have basically one piece of business. So if we could have approval of the agenda, someone to move that, please. Marianne, second. Seconder,
I'll
Connie.
second.
Thank you. So we will declare the agenda approved. Disclosure of any pecuniary interests or nature thereof. Are there any conflicts of interest that anybody foresees with today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from our previous meeting, which was our AGM back on February the 2nd, 2021. I hope everybody had a chance to look over the minutes of that meeting. Moment, or has everybody had a chance to look at those?
Yep, I have it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So if we could look for approval of those minutes, someone to move that, please. Mary Ann again,
I can-
second. Barb,
Barb.
I
Barb will
can.
second that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So the minutes are approved. So we're going to move right into item number 5, the presentation, General Manager of Parks, Culture and Recreation to provide a presentation on the AODA, small halls, and us moving forward. So we'll welcome Terry Vachon to our meeting. And Terry, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, so like Bill said, I do have a PowerPoint presentation to share with you all today. Before I get going, I also want to introduce my team. You can't see them at the moment, but they're available in the background. So Miss Amanda Murray, she's our tourism coordinator. Jessica Kodire, who's our recreation assistant, and Courtney Rogers, who's our youth center coordinator. They make up my team. Together, we developed this presentation today. It was a presentation that we worked with council, and they've provided us direction to share the presentation with you all today. There's going to be a lot of information. I apologize up front, but it's going to be really worth its while. It'll really give you a good insight into some of the big decisions that have to be made by council and, of course, by the hall board members. Again, I will apologize up front. I've been working with 6 halls, and sometimes I might mistake the names of the halls by accident. I got all the 6 halls names in my head. So if I accidentally call your hall not the Sunnidale Hall, I didn't mean it in a malicious way. I just have too many halls in my head at the moment. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen with you all. I ask that you, if you don't mind, if you can press mute on your microphones while I'm presenting, just so I don't get any feedback. Sometimes it's a little disruptive. So if you can just kindly put your microphones on mute, I would appreciate that. And feel free to unmute yourself to ask any questions. So let me just, from the beginning here, you all can see my screen. Yep, awesome. And I could see you all, so I'm ahead of the game at the moment. There you go. So Bill and the Sunnidale Hall board members, our presentation is in 2 parts today. The first part will be loads of information that I'm going to provide you all and educate you all on the existing situation that council has to deal with. We'll take a slight little break, a little pause. We'll give board members an opportunity to ask questions, to clarify any of the information that I provide. And then part 2 is the options that councils come up with that they would like to present to the Sunnidale Hall board moving forward. You will see all the information that you see today. Council has reviewed it. They've asked a lot of questions, And they felt that it would be extremely important that we share this information with you all today. So first question we have to ask ourselves is, how did we get here? Why are we doing these renovations? And as you may or may not know, these are rules that were given to us by the Ontario provincial government, and they were to implement accessibility standards to help the businesses and organizations to remove barriers to improve accessibility in 5 key areas. And I'll talk about those areas very quickly shortly. These standards are part of the Accessibility for Ontario with Disabilities Act from 2005. And I'm going to reference that as the AODA. A lot shorter to say. So the AODA has been active in Ontario since 2005. However, people might still be wondering, what is AODA? So the AODA is the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, which is a law mandating organizations that must follow standards to become more accessible to people with disabilities. The goal of the province is to be fully accessible by 2025. All levels of government, private sector, non-for-profit organizations must comply with this legislation. If we do not, there are some heavy fines that the province will set on everybody involved, specifically directors and officers of a corporation. If they are found guilty of a major offense, fines could be up to $100,000 a day. These, of course, are for major offenses. There are 3 different categories of offenses: a minor, a moderate, and a major. But majors are pretty significant. The councils of every municipality that have a population more than 10,000 must have an accessibility advisory committee, in which Clearview Township does. And by January 1st, 2016, which this date has obviously already passed us, corporations with 50 plus employees need to make new or develop public spaces accessible. There's been no new dates updated by the AODA Act, other than they want to be totally accessible by 2025. The existing timelines that we have in place with all the halls are as follows. So in last year in April 2020, we received an extensive report from RJ Burnsides and Associates regarding the AODA requirements for all the 6 halls, as well as projected estimates of what it would cost to do those renovations. This was last year, April 2020. This year, as part of our budget deliberations, Council has decided that they no longer want to wait for this process. They wanted to get it going this year and start making decisions. So in February of 2021, this year, Council had 2 extensive brainstorming sessions with staff to come up with this presentation and the next steps moving forward. We are now in March and April 2021, where we are meeting the 6 halls individually and perhaps even the public. We're hoping to bring back in May of 2021 all the hall boards' preferences, their feedbacks, the preferred options back to Council in a report to assist them in making their final decisions. And then we're hoping by sometime in June to September that we start implementing some of these decisions on the capital projects. So these are our timelines that we've set for ourselves moving forward. But again, why are we really doing this? We talked about AODA, but what are we really doing this for? So in 2016, the 5 standards for the AODA were combined under the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation. And the 5 standards are information and communication, employment, transportation, design of public spaces, and customer service. The last 2 are the ones that touch our community halls. This is where we need to provide AODA standards for those 2 key areas. And why do we need AODA? At the end of the day, accessibility is good for both the economy and the community. The population of Ontarians with disabilities is steadily growing. We know this. Accessible information and employment make it possible for the growing group of people to contribute to the economy and the society. And likewise, accessible transportation and public spaces ensure that people can move around their communities. I've also highlighted in bold probably one of the main key areas, which is finally the standards of the AODA give all people an equal footing as they work, play, learn, teach, buy, sell, and use their diverse talents to benefit their communities and their province. I've captured 4 what we're calling thought bubbles, and you will see these thought bubbles throughout my presentation today. First one, people with disabilities are just like everyone else. They shop and do business with their friends and family. As our population ages, the number of people with disabilities are increasing. The key is that the goal date for an accessible Ontario by 2025, and my personal favorite, which I've highlighted in bold, is it's not a public if everyone can't use it. This is why we're really doing this and why we're spending extensive amount of time and research getting this done. Some key financial notes to share with you today. At our reserve, Council has been setting money aside for approximately 6 to 7 years. As of December 31st, 2020, Clearview Township has $1.2 million in a reserve. This year in 2021, Council will be investing another $250,000 to that reserve, making it approximately $1.5 million. If you break that $1.5 million amongst the 6 halls that presently require AODA renovations, it represents approximately $250,000 each. If we were to include the station on the green, which was not part of the Burnside report, it would further break it down to approximately $216,000 for 7 halls. We also know that the cost to Clearview Township to ensure the 6 halls annually is approximately $9,000 per year. We also know that the cost of financing today is extremely low, perhaps the lowest it's ever been. It's approximately 2%, and for Clearview Township, it might even be a little lower. So perhaps now is a good time to take out a loan if required. We also know that there are other operating expenses and savings, expense savings and lost revenue that our halls presently receive from Clearview Township. Items such as water and sewer expenses, snow removal, grass cutting, garbage, promotion, staff resources, folks like Kayla that's on today, finance department, and of course, my department, from an expense perspective. Some halls also have received solar revenue. You're going to hear today words such as FADs or modified FADs. What is FAD standards? So FADs is an acronym for Facility Accessibility Design Standards. Clearview Township is committed to providing accessible facilities, programs, and services to all its residents and its visitors. The FAD standards was developed to help staff realize this commitment and provides an innovative and detailed approach for the design of barrier-free and accessible facilities. A made for Clearview Township standard. Its use is mandatory for all construction projects at town facilities, including new construction, additions, renovations, and capital replacement. So in essence, FADs is the Clearview standards. These standards are over and above the building code minimum standards. Modified FADs is a term that's been used by R.J. Burnside, meaning that if Clearview Township so desires, they can build, they can have renovations that would not meet FAD standards, but could still be acceptable by the township. 2 key areas that modified FADs would affect would be to, 1, allow either a universal washroom or accessible multi-stall washroom on each floor, rather than both a universal washroom and accessible multi-stall washroom on each floor. So instead of having 2, perhaps 1 is sufficient. Minimum building code, 1 is you're good with one. FADS standards, we would require 2. This is why it's called modified FADS. Second, we can also waive the requirements to include an area of refuge at exits not located on an accessible path. So these are 2 key areas that if council so chooses to not meet the FADS standards, these are 2 areas that they can agree to go with and perhaps save some money. Finally, on the bottom, we know that while we went through an exercise with the Sunnidale Hall, when you were creating the designs for your entrance, we actually came up with a bit of a hybrid concept, which is our items that are in between the Clearview's FADS standards and modified FADS. So it's somewhere in between. I recall we went through approximately 61 different items just for your entrance, where there was some give and take of what we can do and what we can wait to do. So hybrid FADS is another concept. But again, just to recapture this slide, which is a very important one, modified FADS is the minimum building code standards. Full FADS is Clearview's over and above standards. I'll give you folks a chance later on to come back, and if you want me to clarify more information, I definitely can. Some other key financial notes. So in 2019, part of RG Burnside and Associates' report, they had used contractors that were specializing in these fields of renovating buildings. They used historical cost data from similar projects and or current construction costs published by the RS Means Company. So they used them to come up with these amounts. These costs that you see on the right do not include inflation from last year in 2020, nor inflation in 2021. And I'll talk about the inflation on the next slide. Obviously, Sunnidale Hall already received an estimate for the entrance portion, which represented approximately $450,000. And also the extra 520 or the 210, depending on full FADS or modified FADS, are the extra amounts for the remainder of the building. So in essence, 450 for the entrance, 520 for the remaining of the building if you use the full FADS standards. Equally, modified FADS was 450 for the entrance and 210 for the rest of the items in the building. And then you can also see the total amount of all the halls combined for a total of 6.5 million full FADS and 4.1 million modified FADS as of 2019. And again, on the bottom here in orange, I've captured the reserved amounts that we have in the bank so that you can see the difference of the shortfall, potential shortfall. The inflation effect, this slide, unfortunately, is very sad. So in 2019, again, part of Burnside and Associates' report, they estimated that the inflation per year would be approximately 5%. So if you take the amounts that they estimated in 2019 of 6.5 for FADS, 4.1 for modified FADS, and you add the 5%, you get a total of 6.8 for 2020 and 4.3 for modified FADS. And this is all the halls combined. Again, if you do that same exercise in 2021, add another 5%, you get 7.2 and 4.5. Again, under the comments, these cost estimates should be used as a guide only, as costs may vary according to the time of year, quality of material used, volume of work, actual site conditions, and the most newest one, a pandemic. We know that all those key points will have an effect on the construction price. Also, to add, we did some research with StatsCan. They predict inflation as well. So the building construction price index, so the cost of labor, they also predict a 5% increase per year, which mirrors the amounts that Burnside provided above. We also know that the non-residential construction price index through StatsCan predict a 2.8 increase and a 3.3. So obviously less than the 5%. But here comes the bad news. They also state that the raw material price index, all your metals, your copper, your aluminum, your steel, they're predicting a 13.6% increase and a 27.8% increase for metals. These are increases to the bottom line for materials. Also, finally, the price of lumber. So again, StatScan predicted a 10.2% seasonal adjusted inflation rate and a 44% non-seasonal adjusted rate for lumber. And if you looked at the news this week, there were some news releases saying that lumber has perhaps even went higher than the 44%. Again, under comments, the high demand for softwood lumber for construction and renovations, coupled with low production capacity over the course of the year, are mostly behind the predicted rise in prices. So the prices we know that Burnside set in place are going to go up. Again, I've captured these increases so that the Sunnidale Hall board members can see. On the right was the Burnside's amount that they estimated in 2019. And on the left, if you take the two amounts, the 5% per year, and you add those up, you could see your total amount. So for Sunnidale Hall, it's approximately 1,069,000 if you would go full FADs, and approximately 727,000 if you would go modified FADs. And again, it shows you the total amounts for all 6 halls combined. Some other key financial notes that we would like to share with all the halls are, we also know that Clearview Township in the very near future, will also be invested considerable amount of money in other capital projects. Those are as follows: the Collingwood Street Bridge, Stainer Water Servicing, Creemore Sewer Plan, Creemore Water Solutions, a new fire public works building in New Lowell, and the Stainer Sewer. So of all those projects, we know we have approximately $66 million to invest in major infrastructure in the very near future. This will have a significant impact on council's decisions moving forward. It will also affect the township's ability to take out credit and to take out loans. This is one of our interesting slides that we'd like to share with you all. These are questions that we provided to council, and these are questions that will need to be answered one way, shape, or form in the future. We know that at some point in time, these questions will have to be answered, and there's a lot of them. So and I'll go through them all with you all. Again, we're calling these little thought bubbles. And after we share all this information, you will see that the impact that these decisions that council and the hall boards will have moving forward will have on its citizens. So the first one, I'll start to the left and work my way down. The first one is, do the hall boards volunteers want to continue to commit for another 5 to 10 years of managing and fundraising for their halls? A very key question. It will be answered at some point in time. If volunteers do not want to commit, does council want to keep the buildings? And or do they want to direct them to other departments within Clearview Township to manage? Third, does the existing autonomy of the hall boards still work? The way it's set up today, does it still work for both organizations? Fourth, should the existing role of the township change with operating community halls? Should we continue to be in the business of providing community halls to its citizens? Fifth, is the existing usage of the halls meeting our residents' needs? Example, private functions versus public programming. Sixth, how will council ultimately decide using the FADs or the modified FAD standards? Will it be council's policy? Will it be a hall board's input or your preference? What kind of financial impact will that have? Seventh, how does the growth in Stainer and Creemore affect events and programming in other smaller communities within Clearview? So if we start to have an increasing growth in our major halls, such as the ones in Creemore or Stayner, how will that impact the smaller halls on the outskirts? Eighth, does council just provide a lump sum of money to the hall boards to handle their own AODA requirements themselves? Is that an option? Ninth, does council want to repurpose the existing buildings? Will it meet the existing township strategies? Are there other opportunities that council can do with those halls? Next, do large investments in smaller hamlets provide value to that community? Is it a priority? Does it provide value and or provide benefits for the local residents? So spending $1 million on a hall, is that priority? Or should that money be invested somewhere else within that smaller hamlet? Very key question. Next, will it impact the community if one settlement area loses a hall, but others are retained and invested in? How does that look? Also, a very important one, grant availability, especially after a pandemic. We know today that with our experience that government are planning on spending more money on outdoor facilities, outdoor programming versus indoor. The pandemic, unfortunately, has caused this, and we don't know at this time which grants would be available to assist in these renovations, if any. Second last column, will contractors may not even be available. It's not an option. Does council and the hall boards, then council and the hall boards would proceed to the brainstorming and planning session, which is going to be slide 20 in my presentation. The second questions we had to ask council was, does Clearview Township require 9 community centers? The 7 small halls plus the 2 major ones in Stayner and Creemore. Are they required as part of the township's strategy plan? If no, does township dispose of any of the existing buildings? And what is the exit strategy for that? And I'll talk about that in slide 17. And again, if no, what happens to the existing reserve? Also, what is the appraised value of the buildings? And finally, do the buildings have a residual value to invest in other community projects? So if a building would get sold, could that money be invested in other community projects? And if yes, if township does require 9 community centers, then of course we proceed to the brainstorming and planning session on slide 20, which is in essence part 2 of my presentation today. And again, and if yes, do we renovate or do we replace with a brand new building? Is replacing with brand new a cheaper way to go? And finally, if yes, how will the buildings be kept up in the future after this significant investment? The money that you've seen in earlier slides represent only the AODA renovations, no other items at this point. And finally, if yes, how are the halls operations? How will the halls operations be affected during renovations? It will take time to do these renovations. How will this impact user groups in Clearview facilities? Example, will there be price matching and service matching? So if Sunnidale Hall is under construction, but you have existing renters or tenants that use the hall, they're obviously going to have to use another hall. Will your prices be matched at another hall? And will your service be matched at another hall? We don't know. And finally, should we have individual MOUs with each hall during the construction phase to meet our users' expectations? Third question we ask council. Again, full FADs, modified FADs, or a hybrid of both? If the answer is yes, do we pay for only AODA items that has been identified by Burnside for each hall? Does the AODA renovations include the kitchen and any other items, such as wish list items? And are kitchen fire code requirements included in those renovations? So council will have to decide which standards to go with. Fourth, how does the township pay for these renovations? What is that funding model? Will there be financing, fundraising, reserves that we know we have in place, and grants? How much funds do the halls have to provide or fundraise towards AODA renovations? What's your commitment? Will it be a flat amount, or would it be a percentage of the total project cost? Example, is it a flat, you're in for 100,000, 200,000, or are you in for 10%, 20%, 50%? Again, question that council has to answer. Finally, as part of number 4, what funding mechanism does a township use for a possible future fundraising shortfall? So a hall could say, yeah, we're in for X amount, but what happens if they don't pay that? Who covers the shortfall? Where does that money come from? Finally, a 5th question that we had to ask council was, does council conduct a public consultation? And how do they measure that support from the community? Do they go out to the public and ask their opinion? If yes, what are the questions to ask the public? What does council really want to know from the public? Again, if yes, what method does a township utilize to gather information during a pandemic? Is it hall chair meetings, public meetings with each hall? Do they do surveys? And if no, does council want to make decisions on behalf of the public and the hall boards? A question that's recently come up in other presentations to the halls that we thought would be pertinent to share with you today is, what are the AODA compliances if the municipality does not own the building? So if the municipality sells the building to the hall board or to anybody else, what standards do they have to meet? What we know from our research is that major renovations, again, major renovations, not minor, must meet at a bare minimum the Ontario Building Code, or what Burnside refers to, modified FAD standards. This is for any organization that serves the public in Ontario. The completion timeframes may be different between a municipality and a private sector or a non-for-profit organization. However, those dates have already come and gone. That was back in 2016, 2017. That was set by the province. So we're already into overtime. We also know that perhaps the renovations may be cheaper for a private or non-for-profit corporation, as they may go through their own procurement process and include items such as volunteer work, contractor donations, selecting their own neighbors to do the repairs. The municipality does not have that flexibility. The municipality of Clearview Township will go through a procurement process, which includes a tender, a request for proposal, or a request for quotations. And quite often, volunteer work, contractor donations, selecting people that you want does not come into effect. Another difference that we found out is that there's a slight difference in operating requirements for a private or non-for-profit operation that has 50 or less employees. So we know that the employment standards, providing information and communication, accessibility policies, and training programs are different between a municipality and a private sector. And finally, there's no accessibility advisory committee is required for a private organization. So in essence, from a renovation perspective, no difference, but from an operating perspective, there are some slight differences. Again, what are the criteria to renovate? So as an example, in which order do the halls get renovated? We have 6, potentially 7. Do we do one at a time? Does Clearview Township do all at once? And perhaps there's a potential savings with one major tender. Do we go with engineered design ready halls? Does council decide to go with the least costly or the most costly? Again, or vice versa. the public process, RFP or tender or RFQ for all or individual halls? And again, do we include in-kind donations? Are in-house renovations allowed? On the right side, once you start renovating, who manages the construction? What is the role of the hall board throughout that process? Do we require an MOU to spell that out? Who will ultimately approve the final specifications for AODA renovations? Each hall on their own, so each hall be on their own for construction, and council just wash their hands? Do they hire a township project manager on a contract to manage the construction of all the halls? What are the insurance constraints during these construction? And finally, who is responsible for ensuring that the work is completed and to what standard? Who is that person? A lot of questions that need to be answered. Here's a slide regarding the standard for ventilation control and fire protection of a commercial cooking operations. I mentioned earlier that presently all of our kitchens and all of our halls, in the 6 community halls, do not meet the existing NFPA standards. Specifically under subsection 2.1.1.2, this applies to buildings that are classified as a major occupancy, which means any structure used or intended for supporting or sheltering any use or occupancy in which community halls are defined as, in which our community halls are defined as Group A, Division 2. This means that under 2.6112, it states that cooking operations that produce smoke or grease-laden vapors shall be provided with an exhaust system and fire protection system in accordance with the NFPA 96. So when they say grease-laden vapors, something as simple as bacon produces grease-laden vapors, as an example. We've also found out that it would take the total estimated amount to update an existing cooking operations in the 6 community halls is approximately $20,000 per hall, or $120,000 for all 6. This is pretty much an up to amount, up to approximately 120 for all 6 halls. On the right side, I showed you some pictures of what some of those the protection systems that are required for the halls. So what happens if the township wants to sell the hall board, sell a hall to the hall boards? Again, more questions that need to be answered. Would the community halls, would it be given or sold to the volunteer board? Will that solve any AODA issues? And would the renovations be cheaper? Obviously, the new incorporated boards would need to become incorporated to protect the volunteers. And so by doing so, who would pay for this? Would the township support that amount? What are other support that the township can provide to a new incorporated board? Items such as taxes, grants, snow removal, grass cutting, garbage, staff resources, and also how long would that support be? Approximately 1 to 5 years. Also, the new incorporated hall board's responsibilities will obviously change, including financial operations. You'd have managing liability, operating in capital costs, taxes, SOCAN, event and alcohol regulations, and health and safety inspections. These are all items that the township presently does for the hall boards and their halls. Obviously, if sold, this responsibility would be in turn on the members. And finally, what happens if the property is sold within a few years? Would there be a first right of refusal after X amount of years? Meaning, if the township would sell a hall to a new incorporated hall board, how long do they have until they can resell it? Or how long does the township have a first right of refusal? So that's part 1 of our presentation today. Part 2 is we will be providing council's options that they came up with to the Sunnidale Hall. to review, and then we'll be seeking some feedback on those options from you. So at this time, I'll stop sharing my screen before we present the options, and I will ask if any members of the Sunnidale Hall have any questions on the slides so far. And it gives me a bit of a chance to have a drink of water. So Bill, as chair, I'm looking to you to see if there's anybody that has any questions or require any clarification on any of the slides that I've provided so far. And then please let me know when you'd want us to move to part 2.
Well, no doubt there's going to be a plethora of questions that people are going to want to ask. Anybody that does want to ask a question, keep it on point, keep it short. Let's not get off into different directions. This is a long meeting to begin with. So anybody who's got a question, unmute yourself now. If not, we're going to carry on with part 2. Has anybody got a question? Marianne, you're not muting, so you're okay. Ed, you're fine. Barb, anything? No, Barb's gone back on the mute. Terry, let's carry on.
Wow, must have did a decent job. No questions.
Or it's too confusing.
Or too confusing. Or information overload, right?
There you go. Carry on. No, good
There.
presentation so far.
Yep.
No,
Marianne,
I was just gonna say, there's so many questions, I don't even know where to start. Wow.
Well, we
Anyway,
gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, carry on, Terry, that's great.
Okay. All right. I will reshare my screen. So can you guys hear me? Yep. Okay. Part 2. So again, choosing the AOD options by the hall boards and providing feedback. So before I present council's options, I wanted to take a little bit of time and go over the items that Burnside provided to us with respect to what needs to be done at the Sunnidale Hall. So on the bottom right is a table that shows that they've broken down every item the best to their ability, again, representing an elevator. And these are FADS amounts. So you can see on the top, we have full FADS 450 plus 520. And the table that you see here represents FADS amounts. So I guess it's more the higher end of the spectrum. So again, I'll take a little bit of time and I will read what Burnside has identified for the Sunnidale Hall that needs to be done. So they recommend that a 2-story addition currently under consideration for the Sunnidale Hall would contain a universal washroom on each floor. Again, these are FADS standards, and a limited use, limited application elevator, an accessible entrances, a drinking fountain, and a bottle filling station, and also a front entrance canopy. They also expect that a reasonable construction budget of this was $450,000, as reported in the technical MOU dated December the 10th. So this represents the $450,000 entrance project that we've already done. In addition to that proposed addition, the following work also needs to be completed by the Sunnidale Hall Community Center to address the remaining FADS requirements. In the rear addition is to construct a 2-story addition at the east elevation of the building that will contain a male and female accessible multi-stall washroom on each floor, a stairway and exit, and also an area of refuge. Interior renovations would consist of enlarging the southwest stairs near the main entrance to meet the FADS landing and width requirements, reconfigure both the lower and upper kitchens to meet FADS requirements, door replacement to meet the minimum required width and include power door operators to each, installation of tactile walking strip indicators at the stairs, new signage to comply with the FADS section 11, and also providing assisting listening devices. Some exterior improvements would consist of providing accessible path from the parking to both the north and west entrances, and also providing accessible parking stalls, including asphalt pavement markings, and signage. So these are the items that Burnside has reported to us that would have to be done at the Sunnidale Hall to meet FAD's standards. So when council reviewed all this information, they came up with two options to provide to Sunnidale Hall. On the top, we've captured all of the possible options that we can think of as from the information that we've already presented that could be considered to each hall. And I'll go through them very quickly. Again, an option would be status quo, no renovations, no changes. Second, provide a lump sum of money to the hall board and let them deal with it. Third, have a township manage or repurpose building. So use a building for its own purpose, for the township's own purpose. Fourth, sell or transfer the building to a new incorporated board. Fifth, sell the building privately. Sixth, which is more of an addition to other options, which is to include all the kitchen fire standard renovations to meet those standards. Seventh, renovate full FADs. Eighth, renovate modified FADs. Or ninth, renovate a hybrid concept, something in the middle of those two standards. Next, just demolish and build a brand new building. Or finally, just close the building down, for lack of a better word, mothball it. And or perhaps there are other options that we haven't thought of that the hall board may have that would want council to consider. So these are all the options that was put on the table for council to consider. The following are two options that council would like to propose to the Sunnidale Hall board. Again, there's no preference. We'll call them 1 and 2, but there's no preference made by council at this point. So the first option that they would like to do is to implement a modified or a hybrid FADs to the existing building. So council is proposing this as an option, and the township would be responsible for 75% of the total cost, and the Sunnidale Hall board would have to commit 25% of the total cost. Again, those financing details can be determined in the future. If we take the modified FADs amount plus the $20,000 for the kitchen, it would represent in 2021 approximately $728,000. Of that, 75% would be $546,000 that the township would pay for, and the Sunnidale Hall would be responsible for $182,000 of that amount. Like I said, it would include kitchen renovations to meet the NFPA fire code. We also talked about investigating installing a stair lift versus using an elevator. Burnsides has captured in their notes in their report that stair lifts might not be all that useful because it's actually not universally accessible, since it does require key operation and it calls for someone to assist at all times. And going back to the true essence of AODA, someone with accessibility needs, should be able to receive the service without any assistance from anybody else. Finally, there were some concerns about the costs of the ongoing elevator operations. We know it's expensive to operate. We know it's expensive to inspect. So that was also considered. And what impact will it have on the hall board's budget? What impact will those maintenance items or inspections have on the hall board's budget? So that's the first option that council wants to put on the table. The second option would be to sell the building to a new incorporated board. They would sell the land in the building to the hall board for $1. There would be continued support from Clearview Township, items such as snow removal, snow removal and other services to be negotiated. There would maybe some assistance with insurance costs, some taxes through the Community Assistance Grants Program, or provide proportionate funds from the reserve, and also assist with legal expenses. It is anticipated that there would be a 12 to 24-month implementation timeframe to incorporate a new board and get the business established. You could also update the kitchen to fire codes using the existing reserve that's in place. And again, if the building would in turn be sold by the hall board, the council is proposing that it would be up to 10 years that they would have first right of refusal. And finally, it was also identified that it might be cheaper for a new incorporated board to complete the renovations, as I mentioned earlier in one of my slides. Obviously, a private or non-for-profit organization has different procurement process than the township's tender process. So this is the end of my presentation today, Mr. Chair. These are two options that council put on the table. Council is seeking the hall board feedback. Some hall boards have preferred to take the information and digest it a little bit and get back to us. And some have provided some feedback already. So I'll be looking at you to let us know how you would like to proceed. If you want to provide feedback right away, or if you want to take some time to think about it and meet again in the future. But my team and I are available. We can take down the information. We can actually input information right away if we wanted to into the slide, but it's totally up to you.
First question, Kayla, if you can hear me. I know this is live on YouTube. I assume once this meeting is over, that this will be saved on YouTube. Can we re-reference this? Terry's presentation was wonderful, but a lot to absorb. So I'm assuming we can go back and re-watch this presentation at our leisure.
Absolutely, Bill. And I will also send you Terry's presentation so that you can go through it at your leisure.
Okay, perfect. So Terry, can you just put that last screen back on for a sec, please? Because I do have a question.
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so earlier, almost right off the bat, when the meeting started, you had indicated the reserve that council had that was it 1.6 million that set aside? And you had kind of broken it down where if the 6 halls were to share that money, Sunnidale would be in for just over 200,000. So when I look at your slide you just had on there, where one of our options is for council to go with a modified or hybrid FADS to the tune of 748,000 or whatever it was there. Yeah, 728. And all of a sudden they would cover 75% of that for over $500,000. Now, where is that now 546,000 coming from? If the reserves only has 1.6 million to share among 6 halls?
Excellent question, Bill. Council hasn't determined where that money is coming from yet. They need to collect all the information from all the halls, from all the hall boards first, to find out what's that total amount. And then whatever that difference is, they will make decisions on where that money will come from. I did reference in one of my slides that the options are financing it, which basically comes from taxation, potentially grants, potentially I forget what the third option was, but council has not determined yet where that money is coming from. The first step is to find out how much money are we talking about for all 6 halls combined.
Okay. Sunnidale, we've never been a board to drag our feet. We've always wanted to go, and this will be no exception. Having said that, what kind of timeline are we looking at to give council a firm decision on how we're going to move forward?
Excellent question. As soon as possible. I'm hoping, again, I showed my timelines right at the beginning. We're hoping to bring back reports from each hall before the end of April. So the end of April, the latest. But as soon as we do receive feedback and we receive the hall's preferred options, we will bring it to council as soon as we can. We have to meet council's meeting schedules, but again, we're hoping to be able to bring back reports by the end of April.
So, having said that, some of the questions you posed earlier in your presentation, as far as getting community input as to whether or not the halls are still viable, necessary, usable. The topic of fundraising fatigue is a huge one, especially with the pandemic. So it's, from my standpoint as the chair, we're now being asked to come up with a decision of how we want to move forward in the next 5 to 6 weeks without a lot of information as to how things might look in the future. And that to me is going to play a major role in what our decision is here, whether or not we buy, buy the building and the land for $1 and make a go on our own. I mean, we've always been very successful, but there's a lot to think about here, and we're not going into this completely blind. But when I see things on the slides like, oh, council will give us consideration, negotiate help as far as insurance and taxes, and okay, I need, my personal thought is I need to know where that commitment's going to come from council. I can't just go on the thought of, well, they'll cover our snow removal, they'll give us a 50% tax break. We kind of need to know, exactly what we are in for before we make a commitment this strong. Like for me, I mean, we're out here in the boonies. We do well. We have our euchres, we have our turkey dinner, we have our pancake breakfast. We rent it out for buck and does and weddings, and we do well. Having said that, can we generate enough rental revenue to make a go of it? I don't know. I personally, at my age, I'm not interested in taking out a $500,000, $700,000 mortgage to renovate a community hall for half a dozen wedding receptions a year and 2 dinners and Wednesday night euchres. I really fear that. So I don't want to go mortgage poor. We will discuss as a board, obviously, how we move forward. I won't speak on behalf of the board, but I think we'll be looking at a major change in attitude as to what there's a big difference between what we want and what is realistic. And we're going to have to come up with that as a group. So having said that, anybody out there that has questions for Terry, unmute yourself now. Again, let's keep it on point. Let's not get off in a different direction here. Let's try and keep it short if we can. So Ed, Marianne, Barb, Connie, if any of you have questions, just put your hand up, unmute yourself and fire away. Anybody? Doug, yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Bill. Listen, I really understand your comments that you just made, Bill. And I would hope that you would understand that I know you just said you're not going to speak on behalf of the whole board, so I'm going to be clear, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of all of council. But I can advise you that council has taken this entire project seriously. We have worked with our management staff here, Terry and his team, come up with some opportunities. And council met in 2 separate sessions to come up with all the opportunities and options that we could come up with that we can present. Now, they seem a little loose, you're right, because there's no clear understanding about taxes or revenues or granting or any future operation. That's just sort of talk right now. But the idea is that, the option's been put forward. If you wish to create an independent board, that would be an incorporated board to protect the interests of the volunteers and, set that up, that the township would work with this board to negotiate that and to create that document and to create that operation. So that's why we put it on the table. And further, it's not something that council has made a decision on. What we did is we created the options and gave them to Terry. That's why Terry and his staff have come forward with this lengthy presentation. And as Terry said at the beginning, it's a lot of information to consume for sure. So we're not trying to overwhelm you. We're trying to at least have you, all of your board, understand as volunteers and taxpayers to Clearview Township that any way around this, it's a very expensive issue. We have to make a big decision. And a lot of those thought bubbles that were presented are that to me is the one that says it all, with some 20 thought bubbles that have questions that need to be answered, Bill. So anything from your board, you could ask us as members of council, or Terry as our staff. We'd be happy to help you. But to be clear, there's no decision made by council about any of our boards or any of our halls at this time. We're still in the, seeking information and desperately waiting for Terry's report that he will bring forward soon. Is that helpful, Bill?
It is. Again, going back like Terry's last slide, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that kind of where you're looking at us? Like, here are your two options. You've presented us with two options at the end. Council decides to go with the, again, hybrid modified fads, and you're going to cover 75 to R25, or you're going to sell us the building and the land for a buck and say, good luck. Are those the two options right now on the table for us as a board?
They are, but as Terry pointed out at the very top of that very slide, if he's got a minute, Terry, just pop it back up while I'm talking. At the top of that slide, he also had the word other with a question mark. And that is important because if you have another option, if you have something else that you'd like to bring forward, is there some other way for us to try to, cost effectively apply taxpayers' dollars from across the entire township to provide this service and answer some of those thought bubble questions while still maintaining operation of a community hall? Do you have another option? I mean, honestly, council looked at all of these things and we debated quite a bit, and we came to these two recommended options that we then directed Terry to present to your board.
Yeah,
there are others, but you tell us what you think.
Our last meeting as a group, we talked about a major scale back.
Yes.
And again, not to sound like a broken record, I'm not interested in supporting a $500,000 mortgage. I don't care if the interest rates are 1%, let alone 2%. I'm not interested in going out with cap in hand in a community that's already suffering through a pandemic and asking for donations to carry this thing. So we are looking at scaling way back and maybe just doing the minimum. We love our hall. We certainly don't want to see it mothballed, as Terry said. But again, we'll have to talk about this as a group on a private message. We all have our own wish list. So I think we're looking at a major scale back. That's what I'll say.
I support you on that, Bill, and I also understand it. We also too recognize that we want to do the minimum, and you can appreciate that there have been many of our halls and great volunteers that have great ideas on how we would have the opportunity to add to this renovation, and that would exceed the minimums, and that would exceed the amount of money that we could even try to muster to put something together. And so that therein lies the problem, right?
Yeah.
So I hope you appreciate that. We also agree we must do the minimum, and yet we also respect the fact that these are valuable assets to our community, and they certainly create a sense of community by the operation of the halls, and that's why we support them. And that's why I'm there for your for your breakfast. I want to support your hall. I really do.
You're at our breakfast because you like our breakfast, Doug.
Damn straight. Right on.
But see, the thing, my opinion is, and I've grown up rural my entire life. I've always lived in the boonies wherever I've lived. And the community hall to me is exactly what Sunnidale Corners is right now. It's a small, welcoming, homemade community hall. I mean, in a perfect world, yeah, we'd love to have gold-plated toilets, but that doesn't work. We don't need to have the Air Canada Centre at the corner of 26 and 10. We don't need the Toronto Convention Centre at the corner of 26 and 10. I think there's many options in the area for halls. What we cannot provide, Stainer Arena can provide, or another hall can provide. So I think all the halls need to really look at themselves and say, what is our end goal here as far as what we're wanting to provide? We've had great renters forever the way we are. So, why change for the sake of change other than bringing it to code as far as the accessibility in the kitchen? So, but that's something we as a Sunnidale Hall Board need to discuss on a separate meeting. So anybody got questions out there from our board? I've seen nobody muting here. This is between the mayor and I. Mary Ann, you must have something.
Bill, can I just add? Can I just add to the?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, if I could just add a comment to your comment you just made.
Yeah.
And I mean, I totally appreciate wanting to do the bare minimum, but there is something that the Sunnidale Hall and all the halls have to consider. You can do the bare minimum today, but at some point in time, all those AODA requirements have to be done. Maybe not today, but they will be tomorrow. And we showed about the inflation effect. So maybe they don't do it today, but in 5 years from now, they may have to be done if the province is serious about an accessible province by 2025. What will be the cost of those items 5 years from now? You might look back and say, man, we should have did it when we had the chance, because now it might be double 5 years from now. So it's just something for the whole board to consider. And that's why we put all the items on the table today, is to deal with all the items today.
Yeah, and I think what rubs a lot of us the wrong way, Terry, those of us volunteers that do this, again, with our free time, is being told by a government, and I'm not saying municipal, it's obviously coming from a higher level than municipal, but I don't think that volunteers who give up their time like to be told what has to happen if there's not going to be some definite committed support from that level of government. That's fine. You want to tell us that by 2025 or 2030, you have to have elevators, you have to have lifts. That's great. Then you better be able to back it up and provide the funding if we can't. That's the way I look at it. And I mean, there's so many regulations now and so many rules. I mean, government, no offense, and again, this goes higher than municipal, Doug, so don't take this the wrong way, but it is absolutely ruining volunteerism. Government is ruining volunteerism. When you have to take a 3-hour or a 5-hour online course so that Fran Somerville can sit and sell tickets to a pancake breakfast because she has to know how to speak 5 languages and talk properly to somebody that's in a wheelchair, that just ruins the community spirit. And that is ruining volunteerism in the country, in my opinion. But again, I'm getting off in a tangent.
I look forward to your letter.
Anybody else from our board have any questions or comments? Take yourself off mute. Marianne, go ahead. Take yourself off mute. Go ahead.
Yeah, those points are good. The one that I was kind of wondering about was the point that if we stay as a group and do all these hauls together, that it's only going to be one contractor, somebody we don't know, where right now, I've talked to 2 contractors in our area, right at Sunnidale Corners, Nordographs and Clark's, and they're all gun-ho. They really want to help this haul of ours in the community to do as much as they can to make this happen, right? But if we stay together, there's just going to be, will there be a contractor from Toronto come up and just say, okay, we'll do them all, and this is the price we're going to do them? But they don't really care. They're after this, right? You know, so the people that would say, you know, I could have done that, and I could have done that a lot cheaper. Now, when we did the first renovations back in 2011, gee whiz, I think we did a real good job on that. And it was only the whole board that you know, and our volunteers that did it. You know, Ed and myself and Connie and Mike. I mean, we're all, Barb and Glenn, they were all there. And we took this under our wing, and we got a nice looking haul out of it. Now it's ready for another tweak because we're kind of not forced into it. But yes, we know that the stairs need to be replaced. And yes, we need some sort of wheelchair because all our junior farmers are now gone somewhere else. And there's no strong men anymore to lift those wheelchairs up those steps. So I'm not that I'm making fun of it, but we understand that. But gee whiz, you know, like, you know, if maybe we need to take the money and as a whole board by ourselves, you give us the money and we'll run with it, because we may make that whatever money it was, however, 546, we can make that 546,000 go a long way, more so than if you left it for one big contractor from the city who don't even know where Clearview is, puts it in his GPS. But anyway, that's my thought.
Go ahead, Connie. Go ahead.
Well, Marianne, I think if we were going to take, what I think I'm hearing from you is that you prefer that the council give each hall just a large sum of money and let them handle it. And that was one of the options we haven't decided on yet, but it was brought to us. I think Sunnydale could do it. Yes, absolutely. I'm not sure all the halls could. That's the problem. So giving that lump sum of money to all the halls and then figuring out what they're going to do with it, we might see a lot of halls closing after they spent all the money. So I'm not sure how that would work, but I know it would work for Sunnydale. So I understand what you're saying. Anyway,
Well,
I kind of get it.
but well, I'd agree with that, but I'll tell you, I don't care about the other halls. I care about, no, I'm sorry, but I care where the money's coming from, because we've seen some of the other halls and they have their issues, but we can't look after, as a hall board, we have to look after us. And we, like I say, we did it before in 2011, and we have a lot of smart people that live around us who helped us deal with the construction back in 2011. And we had it all done in, I don't know, what we were all done by 2013, 2012, something like that, with minimal support from the township. I mean, I said that wrong. But we did a lot of the work by grabbing money and looking after our own, you know what I'm saying? But
yeah.
I may have said that wrong. Hi, Terry. You waving at me?
I am, yeah. Bill, I do have a bit of a little bit of an answer for Marianne, if I can share. Marianne, I mean, I wasn't here in 2011, so I'm not familiar with the process that took place back in 2011. But I know in 2021, as long as, in my professional opinion, as long as the municipality owns the building, as long as you're using municipal funds, we need to follow municipal policy. And the municipal procurement policy doesn't have that flexibility that you're looking for. So if the Sunnydale Hall Board owned the building on its own as its own incorporated board, you would have that flexibility because you can do your own procurement policy. The township, as far as I know, does not have that same flexibility. We have to go through the procurement process. We have to tender it out. There are strict Ontario rules and regulations around that. The Toronto company may be successful with that tender, and there's nothing the township can do about that. Not in the existing setup, not in the existing structure that we have in place. So I just want to make sure that the Sunnydale Hall knows, the municipality has a transparent process. There's no other ways around that. So if the Sunnydale Board Hall wants to do what you propose, which is use the local, pick and choose who you kind of want, you'd have to do that on your own. I'm pretty sure you would not be able to do that for the municipality. 95% sure.
That's for the build, right, Terry? But
Correct.
if we want to get furniture or anything else in the hall that we need to go with this renovation, we could do it in kind. But for the build, it would have to go, if we're going to go through the township, it would have to go through, as Terry said, the township process.
And the big one there also is ensuring the liability of the construction. Again, if you're using municipal insurance to cover the construction costs, if there's a defect in that construction, our insurance is, the township's insurance is responsible for that. So again, they rely on policies to make sure it's done right. So that's why there's no flexibility in that process. Only for construction, correct, Councillor Leishman?
Yes.
Yeah. If you buy furniture, that's for you. But when you're making alterations to, especially major alterations to a building, we have to follow municipal policy.
So what's the difference then back in 2011? Geez, we didn't seem to have any. I mean, we had so-and-so do this, so-and-so do that. We had board members who say, okay, I'll look after the roof. I'll look after the siding. We'll get the contractors. And I mean, we did all of that with $100,000. That's what I'm saying. That sometimes, and I think we thought at the time, everything was at code, or most of it, as much as we could. I mean, we opened a lot of doors for wheelchair accessibility. We lowered some of the kitchen, which at that time was supposed to be in code. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So, and then what was it, 2 years? Connie, 2 years, 3 years later, then we took the paneling off and we put, or not paneling off, but we did the drywall.
Right.
And and we got some help from the township for that, and we paid whatever whatever we had to pay, a half or whatever. And that was fine. But now all of a sudden, we're getting reeled in saying that, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that. And so has it changed that much in 9 years? I guess it has,
Yes.
because here we are, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I apologize, Marianne. I wasn't here in 20. I don't know. I can
Oh,
do some
you
research. I can
missed-
find out.
Oh, Terry, you missed a good time.
I'm up for a good time, Marianne. That's for sure. I mean, I can do some research and find out, how it was done back then. But I mean, today's day, and again, I could be wrong, but I'm quite familiar with procurement policy. I mean, I manage this every day, and so my understanding is that's the way it would be done. It's through if the township continues to own and insure and finance the project.
Well, that's going to be something, hopefully, if you send it to me, I can print it off, because that should be a good talk when we all get together to see which way we're going to go.
Well, yeah, we as a group really need to look at our previous years and see just what we think we can actually afford moving forward. I mean, and here's this pandemic that nobody saw coming ever. We used to have some pretty good years, but what if this had happened 2 years ago and we decided to make a go of it on our own, and a year later the pandemic shuts us down? We have no revenue coming in to cover our bills. So these are all things that we need to discuss in a separate meeting soon, and decide how we want to move forward. So Barb, you're unmuted. Do you have any questions for Terry?
I guess the only one that I wondered about is, why are the halls all being grouped together, and can we not be individualized?
So we are.
Kind of what
Okay.
Marianne's saying. So
I captured the first part. I think, Barbara, you might have froze at the end there, but
she asked why all of the halls are being grouped together. Like, why is this being done as a 6-hall group project as opposed to individual, separating it out?
yeah. So excellent question, Barbara. The answer is council is actually doing both. So during the planning process, they need to group it all together because all those renovations are required for all the halls. So council needs to make a decision for all the halls. So that's being done all at once. It's being looked at all at once. But I'm hoping to bring back individual reports back to council to make a decision on each hall separately. So actually both is kind of happening. So during the gathering of information, during the planning, council needs to see the big picture. But then and they'll see that big picture, but then they're going to deal with each hall one-on-one, moving forward from there.
Well, then if the big picture will be, then the price might change. The 75% might be different from 728 to 8 or 9.
Mayor Measures, yes?
Thank you, Bill. Just to support what Terry's saying, Barbara, we're one township, we're one Clearview, and taxpayers across the entire township are paying for these renovations in any of these halls. And so it is a decision that's going to have to be made by council, because council represents all the taxpayers, and we represent how we're going to be able to get this to the funding. And so it's you're right. Terry's answer is very accurate, and the fact that we've bundled it all together so that council has an understanding about what this entire project looks like, because it is our responsibility about AODA, and so we have to abide. But we are going to look at it individually, as we did right from the start by having RJ Burnside go and make their assessments on each individual building, and now we're obviously meeting with each individual hall board to come up with this discussion as well as some ideas that we can take back to council. And your suggestions are going to be heard because they're going to be reflective in both Terry's report and certainly from the experiences that Councillor Leishman and myself are having at this meeting. And so certainly your individual concerns will definitely be brought up. Council must look at it though from a holistic point of view that we're serving the entire township. So we have to be able to face taxpayers and justify why we spend money anywhere. And so it's important to keep that in mind. Okay, is that helpful?
Okay.
Terry, Bill here again.
Yep,
Just
hey,
another
Bill.
question. Yeah, if just what would happen if you get all the recommendations in from the halls at the end of April, and 2 of the halls said we are going to lock the door and walk away. We're done. Sell the building. We're out. So now you're down to 4 renos instead of 6. Does that change the budget? As far as, would that now up the budget? Like, let's say Sunnydale said, you know what, we're done, we're out. Does that mean that the other 5 halls or 4 halls now split what Sunnydale would have got, or not necessarily?
I mean, Bill, I don't have a definite answer. Again, I can't speak on behalf of council, but I could say that, yeah, if some halls would, get out of the hall business, it would have an impact on council's decision. But I can't answer what council is. Yeah, I don't know.
For example, the 1.6 million that's in the pot there for the 6 of us to split. So
Yep.
now it's down to 4. So do the 4 now split the 1.6, or does council say, no, you're still getting that original 200,000 and the rest, too bad, it's going into the bridge or the sewer or whatever?
Again, I can't answer on behalf of council. It's a council question you're asking, Bill, but I mean, that money is set in the reserve to be spent on the halls. So I mean, you can probably do your own kind of assumption. That 1.6 is there to be spent on renovations. How council divvies that up to all the halls, depending on how many halls are left after this process, obviously will be up to them. But
Okay.
I mean,
one last question for you, and then I'm done.
Yep.
So since we need to mull over our options here and come back to council with the decision, are you going to send some sort of a document outlining the questions that need to be answered by us, or do we need to look at this presentation again and write them down and answer them?
I think option 2, Bill, like Kayla says, she's going to share my presentation with you. There is, a spot there with some blocks to enter in your information, or if you want to provide it back in a resolution or provide it back in your own report or a letter, whatever way you choose, Bill, to share your thoughts and share your ideas and ultimately share your preference.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Ed, we haven't heard from you. Do you have any questions or comments, Ed? If you want to take yourself off mute, let us know if you have anything. Just give Ed a sec there, Connie, and then if Ed has nothing, we'll, because we've heard from everybody but Ed. Ed, if you have nothing, just shake your head no, and if you do, then take yourself off mute. Okay, you're talking, Ed, we can't hear you. You need to take your microphone off of mute. Upper right-hand corner of your screen, you should be able to tap something there to take yourself off mute. Right-hand corner of your screen. Should be a little box with dots in it. Actually, it should say mute. If you see where it says mute in the upper right-hand corner, if you hit on that, it should take you off mute.
Sometimes the space bar works too.
Okay. Hit the space bar on your keyboard there, and see if that takes you off mute there for us. Nothing.
You'd have to,
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Can
Do
you hear
have
me now?
any
Hi,
questions?
Ed.
Yes, Ed, we can hear you. Yep, any questions or
Okay.
comments, Ed? We can hear you.
I want to ask this to Terry.
Yep. Hi, Ed.
You put all this proposal to us today, and how good is that? Does that stand good for 5 years, 10 years, or what? If we got half the job done, then you come out with another proposal that you have to change something.
Oh, I see.
And we're pretty well on with the job. What happens then?
Yeah, that's a very good
Know what I
question,
mean?
Ed. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So what happens if the province changes the rules again in 5 years from now? And you've done all these renovations and you gotta do more renovations? Is that what you're
Yes.
referring to, Ed? Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's a hard question. And yeah, sometimes these regulations are a moving target.
Now-
I can't answer on behalf of the province, Ed. That's
We-
a very good question.
And getting back to the price of this,
Mhm.
I'd say it's maybe 2 years, 3 years ago. You people came and you give us a quote on maybe $200 to $300 or $300 or 300,000 to do the job, and it sure multiplied in that length of time.
It did.
Yeah, it sure did.
It sure did.
Now, it's I don't know what's taking
Equally-
place, you know.
Yeah, equally, Ed, you could have bought a house for 180,000 4 years ago, and they're worth 700,000 today. You know, the market has just went crazy, and I agree with you. You know, I agree with you. I can't answer why
Well-
it's gone up so much so fast. It's, you know, and even the pandemic, we actually don't even know what effect the pandemic will have on the bottom line as well. We're predicting a 5%, Ed, based on what we know. It might even be 50% increase from what the numbers I've already presented you. We don't even know until we actually find out. But yeah, it's scary.
Well, I know in building materials, it is quadrupled. It just in this last year.
Yeah,
Yes.
1 year.
And
So the
how do
ultimate,
we know how to
yeah. And the
Okay.
fear is, what's that going to cost 5 years from now, right? Very good
For
question.
sure. Well, I'd like to think that even if the government does change things in 10 years, that the accessibility portion of it won't be one of them. I mean, I don't know how much more you'd need to tweak it. But there again, having said that, I mean, this is being put on us. So anyway, Connie, you had your hand up before Ed was unmuted there. What did you have?
Well, I was just going to support what Doug said about the halls. And the other thing, Barb, is that each hall was given a different synopsis, like a different situation. Our hall, the offer to our hall is different than what we gave to Avening, and what we gave to Avening is different from Duntroon. They're not the same. The council looked at each hall individually and came up with an idea for each one and how we wanted, or how we thought they should proceed. So that's why we didn't lump all the halls together. We did separate them out. We just looked at them all together, and then we went individually. It was a long meeting, trust me, and it took us 2 meetings to do it. So that's why we got the situation or the scenario that we got, because this is council's idea of what we should be looking at. The other thing I'd like to point out is that there was a little bubble about how did the pandemic affect your hall? Well, we know that we lost a church, so we don't have that regular income all the time. But quite frankly, over the years, we've had different groups come and go as the hall becomes available. So in my mind, I think we'll find somebody else will come to us and say, I want to use the hall every Thursday or Tuesday or whatever. So I think they're out there. I think those people are out there still. And I think they still look at our hall as one of those places they want to be. But anyway, that's just where I'm at. And I'm not even keeping on track. Sorry, Bill. I'll get out of here.
No, I fully understand council's position. It's no different than a landlord who owns 7 houses and he needs to renovate all 7. Not all 7 houses need the same renovation. That's obviously. So anybody else have any more questions or comments? Well, we've got Terry and Mayor Measures on the line. Marianne, are you okay?
Well, I was just going to say, we were talking about, yes, we lost the church by 1 day. 1 day. I couldn't believe it.
Well, we did,
but anyway.
that was prolonging the inevitable. Anyway, let's stay on point. Anything else? Anything else?
No,
this meeting.
Bill, you didn't let me finish. I was still talking. Hold on a sec. No, what I was going to say was, this coming year, we have 2 weddings coming up. One's in August, the other's in September. So I told them, I said, no, you can book it, but it all depends on COVID, if it's going to behave itself, and if we're going to be doing any renovations or not. So that's one thing to look in the future for us, that we do have some bookings, but and they're going to be big ones, but it all depends on what's going on.
Absolutely. Yep. Anybody else? Okay, so yes, Mayor Measures, go ahead.
If we're going to wrap up, Bill, I do want to come back to one of your earlier comments, if I may, and it's in regards to the province of Ontario. This board should not be surprised to hear that we have asked as a township several times to Minister Cho, who is responsible for seniors and accessibility. He's the minister for that ministry in the province of Ontario. We've asked him many times for information about possible grants programs to support the AODA renovations that are going to happen both in our community and across Ontario in other public sector buildings that we've asked him about this several times. Certainly, you also will know that my predecessor, Mayor Vander Cruz, as a member of his council, we supported him also going and asking that same questions. And so I followed up by also meeting with Minister Cho. And as I pointed out last night, Councillor Leishman, of course, you guys all know, made quite a good plea in front of quite an audience of people who heard our plea about small halls and why we need AODA renovations. We have not had a favorable response from them. They've been polite in their responses for sure. But it's interesting to note that the province of Ontario has not made any programs available for our municipality or others across Ontario about how they can support these AODA renovations in public space buildings. So to be honest, we're still pursuing that. We can't phone them every day. But to some of your comments, Bill, if you want to write a letter, I would be more than happy to endorse that and send it on to Minister Cho, myself, on your behalf, or you could write it and I'd just be happy to support your comment. Because it's notable that volunteerism is being impacted across Ontario. Certainly seniors and senior programming require volunteers. It won't exist without volunteers. And so, and certainly our facilities like our small halls, they also require volunteers. So I really support what you said there, Bill. And so thank you for those comments. And also thank you all for all your hall board members coming today to this important meeting. Sorry, it's a little lengthy and it is an awful lot of information that you received. And I'm sure, Terry, I'm not sure if you've already done this. Would you distribute this PowerPoint presentation to Bill and all the members of the hall board so that they could sort of review it themselves and have something to think about?
Yep.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Mayor Measures. Yeah, so my last comment will be just in following up with you just said there, Mayor Measures, is your plea to Minister Cho about grants and programs to support small halls with the accessibility. You had mentioned this at a meeting probably 2 years ago, long before COVID was even heard of, and you made it sound at that time like it was falling on deaf ears. So my optimism that we are going to be in for any kind of government funding now that the government's going to be paying back billions of dollars thanks to COVID, I have little to no faith that there'll be any grant money for small halls. I think we are so far down the chain, and our dear friend Jim Wilson, who's been a great advocate for this area, no longer, I guess he's not going to run again. So our main voice at that level is going to be gone. So that's why I just caution our board, there's going to be a lot of cap in hand fundraising to be done to do whatever we decide to do, whether it's the bare minimum or more. So at any rate, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. Mayor Measures, thank you for joining us. Councilor Leishman, Terry, great presentation. Thank you very much. Kayla, thank you for doing this. Jessica Kodyer, I don't know why you're on here. I mean, I'm going to give Jessica a hard time. I've known her since she was a little kid. Anyway, you're off mute now. Say hi to Uncle Mike for me, Jess. Anyway, everybody, thank you very much for tuning in. And Terry, we will watch for your presentation to come, and we will get back to you with our thoughts and decision soon.
Fantastic. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bill, can
Bye.
I just get a motion to adjourn?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Can we please get a motion to adjourn our
I'll
meeting?
make a motion to adjourn.
Barb,
I'll make a
second.
motion to adjourn.
Yeah, Barb, second by Mary Ann. Good, we're done.
I said.